Welcome to the podcast of the impossible. I'm Peter Wood, and today's episode is all about the Museum of the Impossible. And joining me are two of my go-to guys for great ideas. It's Joel DeWyer and Willard.
There's the swell that we were waiting.
That was I'm so rearranging for everyone here in the studio, and I'm steering behind me, right? I feel like I'm on the back of a hook and ladder truck where everything's behind me. But welcome. Thanks for coming.
It's good to be here.
It's great to be here.
I'm excited to, this is our first three people in the Parlor of the Impossible, all on mic doing one of these. So I'm excited to have you both here. And you have both been on individually, but this is the first time. So this is, for Inside Baseball, we previously have recorded our episodes all as on one afternoon, right? And so even though we shared them with people, sort of 20-minute chunks at a time, this is sort of feels like our second chat here, hanging out and together, right? Which is fun.
Together again.
Yeah,
right?
Together again.
It's been
in fact, I don't know the last time I saw you, Joel, in person. It's been a while.
It's been a very long time.
We're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And I mean, and we also, we'll talk about it at some other point, but there was a time where all of us were hanging out here in this room in front of a camera once again, and doing a virtual magic show.
Yeah.
Doesn't that seem like ages and ages and ages ago? And it really wasn't.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think that's a good thing, right? Like it feels like that was another lifetime.
It's part of the past.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed it though.
It was good.
We did the thing during the time, but I don't want to. It's just like, I mean, I visited both Las Vegas and Disney World during COVID times, and I'm happy that I did because I love both of those places and I wanted to experience them, and I never want to do it again because. Especially Disney World, wearing a mask all day long in Florida was no fun. But it was
breathing in all that hot COVID air.
Right? Yeah. No, somehow we made it through unscathed, so that was exciting.
And what was the big difference in Vegas?
Nothing.
Yeah.
No, I mean the biggest difference in Vegas were when we went, it was literally like a week before PIF reopened, and PIF famously was the first show of any size. I think there were a couple of small shows that were open that we didn't want to go to because we would definitely get a virus, but not COVID. And so we just, so just like at Disney World, the problem was like if you don't have the shows that are sucking people in,
right,
and also like the slot machines where every 2/3 of the machines were dark. So basically they had either turned them off or removed them. So that you have distance between you and the person next to you is now 3 machines away. But it felt like the streets were even more crowded because there were fewer things to use up the people, right?
Uh-huh.
And honestly, that was our experience in Disney World as well.
We weren't inside.
Because there was less to do, But
yeah, seeing shows during that time was so weird. I know that's not all we're going to talk about today, but Branson, they never really closed at all.
Okay.
And so, of course, Branson's a little more seasonal than Vegas, but they never really closed. And I remember going to the shows, but they put protocols in place. Like you had to wear your mask until you got to your seat. And then your party had to have 3 seats between the next party. Right. And then as people discovered that they could still come see live entertainment, then all of a sudden it was 1 seat between your party, because they needed the extra seats or whatever. Sure. And then they would dismiss you sort of like a wedding or a funeral or a wedding. We'll go with wedding. That's better. 1 row at a time. And you had to exit 1 row at a time as you leave the theater. It was all silly.
Well, and
I'm glad it's in the past.
I even said during it, like half of what we're doing is just theater.
It was smoke and mirrors. It totally was.
But we don't really know which half, right? Yeah. The other thing that I was thinking a friend brought up is that like anyone who made an extreme decision, the people who decided this is all fake and it is all just another flu. And then on the opposite end, the friends who I still haven't seen because COVID is still out there, none of them are going to get closure. None of them are going to have a time where somebody blows a whistle and says, listen, you were right. Either your sacrifice was worth it, or you were right to not panic and when everyone else was, and that's what's the frustrating, but we were. I really liked Governor Hogan of the governor of Maryland saying like, well, listen, half the people think I'm doing too little, half the people think I'm doing too much. I think that means I'm doing the right thing.
Sounds like governing to me.
Right. No, it was the very definition of a compromise, but
COVID was actually really interesting for you because you started to generate this idea about the museum and started really that was the inception of the idea, in a serious way.
Well, we should sort of, I mean, obviously sitting around with nothing better to do, but
what are you talking about? We did shows.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I was thinking like, man, it'd be great is if, virtual shows were part of that. Like with the way that I attempted to make lemonade with virtual shows was let me try and showcase things that otherwise I wouldn't be bringing out into the world. So things that are either too big or too small or too fragile or too dangerous to bring to something like a Willard and Wood show. That's what I tried to do in the virtual environment. And there was also talk, we were sort of joking about like, maybe we could bring an audience into the Parlor of the Impossible here. Like maybe we have, 12 people sitting around and doing a live show. But for all sorts of practical reasons, the not the least of which is like, it's my home,
It's in the basement of the house.
Right. So I don't want to, that'd be a little strange. But I mean, we've been talking about the idea of, wouldn't it be cool if the collector had a collection, right? I mean, like a collection that you could visit, right? And that's really been since the beginning of the Collector of the Impossible, right? Like, I don't know how far back you guys remember that, but definitely in a lot of our post-show, post-mortems, sort of idea would come up, you
talked about it incessantly.
Yeah. That's yeah.
Well, along with the difference between probabilities and impossibilities.
That's right. Yeah.
After, it did come up a lot. I mean, you have so many things, so much stuff, and we're lucky, Joel and I, that we get to come and see it, but nobody else really gets to experience the things that you can't drag out and. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and the original idea too wasn't just to have, like a museum, but a performance venue.
Yeah.
Right. Like
sure.
Your preferred style performance venue, you could rig it the way you wanted to achieve what you wanted, and so I think those two came together into a nice marriage.
Yeah. Well, and that was sort of. And I guess we could also talk about our, everyone's got a story from that weekend in March of 2020, when, where were you when the world shut down, right? And in the case of Willard and Wood, we had just signed a year-long contract.
Like literally just signed.
Literally, and
opening weekend.
Yep, the opening weekend was supposed to be whatever that March 12th or 13th, that Saturday night,
right on the Inner Harbor.
Right.
I will say too, I'm really bummed that we didn't get to do that venue.
Same.
I was super excited about it.
Same.
And it was really funny where we started with we were curious what was going to happen with the contract, and then eventually
it just didn't matter.
Like nope.
We may still have a contract.
Sure, yeah, that's hard to say.
I mean, I think the property has changed ownership. I think
it's possible
at least once, maybe twice, and so
yeah.
Somewhere out there, somebody's wanting to know.
in a drawer somewhere.
Right.
Who are Willard and Wood?
Yeah.
What's that?
They owe us these shows.
But I think. And and then I've had people ask like, well, why didn't you just start back up when you were, and I think a big part of it was, as you say, like those weird early hybrid shows, like we still didn't really have a sense. I don't know if I still exactly have a sense of what folks are comfortable with,
Really?
Well, it's been better in the last 6 months.
Yeah,
a lot of restaurants have recovered in nice ways. I've observed, and so I don't know what movie theaters look like now, but I mean, I would think that.
Sure.
Well, but that point, it's hard to put a finger on exactly when that shifted back to where people are like, okay, we're going back out.
Yeah.
But I think it's what Peter said earlier too. There are still people who don't do that, so that some people still think it's too soon.
Well, and I thought I
to risk things.
I just recently, Teller's production of The Tempest just came to the Roundhouse Theater in DC, And I thought it was interesting where it ran for a month or something, but then they also tacked on a streaming option where they had recorded one, did a multi-camera shoot of one show, and for I think it was $25, you could stream it for a limited time. Like you had to log on their website, and I'm sure that is a COVID holdover, but I do kind of wonder. Honestly, that's how I watched the production, because I wasn't able to make the scheduling work out for me to physically get there. But I do wonder how much of that sort of hybrid stuff is going to be good as a holdover from
absolutely.
All that,
Well, and that was part of the challenge. I mean, we talked about doing that, right? We talked about how do we get back into this? Because some people are willing to come. We could probably get 40 or 50 people in a room, but there's probably hundreds of other people who would still be interested. But doing a show for cameras versus for people, it's just a different experience. And,
the feedback that you're getting,
Plus, the camera never claps. It's very rude.
It should. I should get a clapping.
It'd take a few minutes to get used.
You would be the one to invent a clapping camera.
So you're right. That was sort of, and then in terms of the museum project, the two big things that really happened were this past summer. I went on 2 family trips, and both with extended family, and one of them was. One of the things that we did in one of these like lake towns was see
so close to Branson. You were close to Branson, I recall.
Yeah. One of them was we went to see a magic show that had been there for over 2 decades. And I didn't think it was very good. And I was very depressed that this guy has been doing this for over 2 decades. And like a lot of things in my life, I was inspired I'm more inspired by mediocrity than I am from excellence, where
100%.
If I go and see Derek Delgadio in and of itself, I just want to get out of show business altogether because I'm like, well, I can never do that.
No, yeah.
But when I see some guy who's been doing something for 2 decades and it hasn't gotten any
But he had a
good.
billboard, Peter.
That's that right. And turns out you can just buy those, right? And
oh wait, you mean you can just put up your own?
I guess we'll see. Yeah.
You don't have to, no benchmarks. If you have the money, that's the benchmark.
Man, wait till I tell you about the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It's gonna blow your mind. You think a star on the Hollywood Boulevard is merit based? And so then on another trip with family, Christy and I went to the Tuberculosis Museum.
Like where this is going?
Yep. And we paid our hard-earned American $12 each to walk around a building that had been a sort of like a research hospital facility for people who were convalescing with tuberculosis, right? And they had, different exhibits there, and we kind of went as a joke. Like we're looking at things to do in this town, and then we're like, but there's a tuberculosis museum. Like we were just curious, like what in the world is a tuberculosis museum? And like, hopefully you don't get it. And hopefully, and what's in the gift shop, so.
What was in the gift shop? I need an answer.
You got to finish that
question.
Yeah.
There were inhalers. No, there were. It was a lot of books and biographies about the people who were involved in early testing and medical treatments. I bought 2 CDs, audio CDs of music. From
tuberculosis music,
people coughing.
Yeah, is this composed while they were?
No, it was just like local artists who had decided.
This is simultaneously the most fascinating and terrible story I've ever heard.
I mean, yeah. So I'm an artist. I make music, and I decide, where I need to sell my CD is in the Tuberculosis Museum gift shop.
Well, nobody else is doing it, so you have a corner on the market.
Absolutely, yeah. It's my niche. No, it was not.
Well, I mean,
it was
if
not
you've made your
coughing.
way to the Tuberculosis Museum, I would think that
Right. Yeah.
you need some cheering up at the end. Is my guess.
And your money back, probably.
No, I mean it was. I got what I asked for. Like I learned stuff, and
What was the most interesting thing you learned, Peter?
You opened this can of worms, by the way. You remember?
Yeah, I guess
This is your fault.
I did not realize that there was like someone gets diagnosed with tuberculosis, and so they would just send you to this place, and the purpose of the place was for you to just kind of hang out on the back porch and
Sounds like college.
hopefully get better. And there was definitely, it was early enough that there was one of the like, oh, there's something about the atmosphere here that people tend to, heal better. Like there was a little bit of that sort of nebulous, like, not really hard science. But then at the same time, there were people in that building who were doing hard science and who were actually making great progress, but it also kind of weird, like the fact that this town, like was known for like, oh, you got tuberculosis, you got to go to that town,
tuberculosis.
Right. So I that was, it was fun to learn. And also, and like this place does private events, right? Like you can have your corporate event, you can have your wedding at the tuberculosis museum.
So that inspired you.
Those
take
two
a hard look.
I don't want to call I don't want to
Awesome.
call the museum mediocre. But I mean, technically it was like the definition of like we've all been to Smithsonian's, right? Where we're lucky to be near those. And so, and I do, a bunch of stuff with the Spy Museum. Like this museum was definitely, average or below average, and people were, it wasn't crowded, but it exists and it has existed, so definitely those two, things that happened during summer of 2022 got stuck in my craw, and really got me. I had always sort of pushed the idea of my own venue. I sort of was kicking that can down the road as like, well, I'll have that be a retirement thing, right? When I want to retire from touring around as a journeyman, entertainer, I'll sort of settle down and open my own space. And then it occurred to me like, but I'll be older and like, it'll be harder to lift things up and paint things and maybe put in some hours that would be harder. Like maybe I should at least look into what that sort of entails sooner than that, as opposed to waiting,
So the things you've had to think about
yeah.
are what? Location, not only geographically, but the type of venue that you need.
Sure.
What kind of what are you looking for, like in a venue?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is so definitely for phase one, I don't want to deal with food or drink or alcohol. But I know that those elements will make for a great night out for people. So I want it to be, within easy driving or ideally walking distance of those things so that people can go somewhere, they can park, they can have, a nice meal, they can come see a show, they can go get a cocktail afterward, whatever. So definitely that. And then, the good news is beyond that, it could be very flexible. It doesn't have to be like storefront necessarily. Part of me, for example, if you go down a flight of steps, then your rent all of a sudden goes down. Like if it's a street level with big glass windows, then your rent is going to be higher, right?
Sure.
And there are places that are zoned for retail and for warehouse and for office. I could make any of those work, right? Like a space. I mean, especially as long as, with an office thing, you'd have to be able to take down some walls or what have you. But the sort of initial plan is, let me make sure that it's something that's manageable and not too big. If I find some space that's 4,000 square feet, I could fill it up with some cool stuff, but I don't know if that's immediately sustainable for what the rent would be,
Right, sure.
But if it's something that's smaller, part of the idea that, we've all talked about is like, if I can have sort of these, impossibilities lining the walls, kind of like we have here, but even more like interactive, that people can engage with during the day. But then if the middle space is kind of a flexible thing where by day I can roll out some other exhibits, but then evenings and weekends, those exhibits roll away and folding chairs get set up and now one end becomes a stage. So it's all the same.
So it's
space.
not like a separate back room. You actually envision the space being multi-purpose.
It could be. I mean, yeah.
No, for sure.
At least to start with.
Right. I mean, and that's, also like we've talked about private event space. Like if you wanted to come in and have an event there.
Definitely.
And, there's also like if, I know our friend Barry Taylor did a lot of good work with birthday party shows on weekends. I'm not above that. I'm not opposed to it. And I enjoy doing it. But one of the challenges with that is that you really kind of need a space that you can hose down, for where the pizza and the ice cream goes, right?
And they had that sort of dedicated area. It wasn't a separate room, if I recall, but it was
correct
dedicated space for the parties, and they had a raked seating.
Yep. And the only challenge there, and again, what would have made it even better, and what I wouldn't mind, considering is like if there was a door that could be closed on that, the ability to have the sort of after party going on while the next show is getting set up would be even better. So again, like, and also like a gift shop, like I'm sure that if it was sort of a magic and oddities shop, that's the kind of thing where it could help to pay the bills on a slow Tuesday, but I don't, that's not the main drive, just because if there's a space that's big enough that allows me to do that, great. But I think that the main two things are, cool stuff to look at by day, and then evenings and weekends is what I already do, which is let's put on a magic show.
It's like a magic shop you can engage with, but without the creepy man behind the counter.
We'll see. I mean, I'm getting.
Are you able to talk about
going there? Is Peter not going to be there?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you able to talk about some of the areas you're considering as a possible home?
Yeah. I mean, because nothing's in stone yet, for sure. So I started just in the broad sense, Baltimore and DC, and ruled them out pretty early on, only because I don't want to drive that far. I really love where I live, and that'd be too much of a commute.
Yeah, Narnia is far away.
Yeah. I'm still working on the bookcase, or no, the coat closet. Anyway,
wardrobe.
I have the book. Yeah, I need the wardrobe.
The wardrobe, yeah.
But and then also there's just more competition. And
rent's going to be more.
Yeah, sure. So the places that I've been looking at right now are downtown Frederick, Maryland, and old Ellicott City, and then to a potential degree like Sykesville and maybe even downtown Mount Airy, which would be closest to me. But I on the one hand, those are sort of starting to grow. Like in downtown Mount Airy, we just had a brewery that has opened, and there's more restaurant type things there. So it definitely needs to be a place where the sidewalks don't roll up at 6 o'clock. But and
accessible, I would think, to the interstates, pretty accessible.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be too naive about if you build it, they will come.
Right.
But I also don't want to be too hung up on, the nice thing about this area just in general is that as you can still get people from the Baltimore suburbs and from the DC suburbs into, again, Frederick or Howard County,
Right.
So, we'll see. I mean, that's the good news is I have a lot of flexibility in terms of what kind of space I could make work. So if the only the line I'm drawing in the sand is like, I don't want to have to drive an hour to get there. Then that sort of, I can draw that circle on a map and work from there,
Well, I mean, Frederick is a nice area, but so are all the other places you mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Well, and the vibe and atmosphere of those towns are historic, which fits a collector, having all these old historic artifacts you can engage with.
Old and historic is sort of new again.
Yeah.
It's and people. I think the interesting thing is I think people are interested in experiences now more than maybe in 10, 15 years ago. Shows were the thing.
Sure.
And you might be able to do that. But now I think people are less interested in being inside, and maybe COVID helped switch that a little bit. I don't know. But they've inside for a formal show, but going to places, exploring new places they've never been. So,
well, that's one of the things I'm curious about is like, I genuinely don't know which is going to be the lost leader, the daytime museum or the evening magic shows. I want to have a space that allows for both and then sort of try both out. And it may be that it's an interesting enough thing by day that the evening shows aren't every weekend. It's just like a once a month kind of a thing, you know. Or conversely, it may be that the evening shows are popular enough and less so in the daytime, and so then it's only open, you know, 1 or 2 weekdays, like sort of by appointment only, but then lots of shows in the evening. So I want to have that flexibility, you know.
Now, are you thinking of like guest performer opportunities? For instance, if you have shows down in DC or elsewhere on a particular night, you know, the Collector or the Museum of the Impossible can be host to some other performer just to keep it open and to continue to provide opportunities to community.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. Like, you know, not only would I want, you know, colleagues to be in there, or even like an open mic kind of a thing. Like there's, I can see all sorts of possibilities for having a dedicated magic theater, you know. And even, I mean, if a friend, you know, a colleague of mine wants to say, hey, can I like book your space because I have a client who wants a private show, like, you know, that would be awesome as well.
Well, if Penn and Teller are in the area, you could let them use it. You guys have a good relationship.
It might be a little big for them. I don't know how many people they haul in, so, you know, we might have to put maybe their chairs away, but yeah. Well, listen,
and the cool thing for you, I think, I would think, is that right now you're limited in what you can show from your collection by what you can haul around. But now I bet you'll be able to rotate things in and out that you wish you could show.
Well, and that was the other thing, back to what bothered me about the magic show I saw that has been there for over 20 years. The stuff that he was doing, there was so much more you could have installed in that theater, right? Like my vision is to use all of the special effects and theatrical skills that I have to build out a space that feels, people use the term immersive too much, but like I genuinely want that to have that feeling, right? And so there are so many cool magic tricks and special effects that you could integrate into a show if you have it installed, right? As opposed to, I can't, it would be either too difficult or too time intensive for me to do that stuff for these one-off, you know, a one night only show that we're doing.
So here I have 2 questions for you. First, are you going to have a special exhibit on tuberculosis?
I mean, unless there's some impossible thing.
There's got to be a way, since that was part of the inspiration.
It's pretty impossible that there's a museum still educating the public about it.
I guess that's true.
I mean, forget.
Let's also remember Frederick is home to the National Museum of Civil War Medicine.
Well, that's fascinating, though.
If you're also looking for a museum to like, wait, that exists and is still around, like that, there you go.
It sounds like a cross promotion waiting to happen right there.
Yeah, there you go.
What's your second question for you? Is how could people get involved now?
That's a fine. I'm glad you asked for just low it down. That's you're
Peter didn't tell me to ask that question.
I know that was very nice of you. So basically what we're doing right now is we are doing a crowdfunding effort. And so if you go to museumoftheimpossible.com, I am using a company called Patreon, and the way Patreon works is there are a variety of monthly subscription levels. So, you know, it starts at $2 and goes up from there.
And I would bet at some level they would get to hear this conversation before anybody else.
Correct. Yeah. One of the perks is that the podcast of the impossible that comes out, you get to hear every episode a week early. So you'll be the first to know about all the cool stuff that we're doing, announcements, you know. But then I'm going to be documenting this whole journey when I'm building cool stuff in the workshop, and when I'm going to, you know, find a new cabinet that I'm going to install this curiosity in. Like, all that is going to be documented. And so you'll get to come along for the ride and sort of be, and even voting type stuff. Like the very first exhibit that I want to make, I'm going to leave it up to my patrons to tell me what it's going to be. Like I'll give some options. Here are some things that I'm thinking about, but then we'll have it as a poll. So it'll sort of be like a community group effort kind of a thing. So that'll be, so if Museum of the Impossible.
I was going to say live tuberculosis in a jar.
All right. I'm going to have to add that, you know. But yeah, museumoftheimpossible.com. And we should do this again, but we should probably wrap this episode up. So thank you all for hanging out.
When we talk about this again, I want
yeah.
to know what level I have to get into to have one of those shirts.
Oh yeah, this is fancy. We'll see. I don't know. You have to know someone. But that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast of the Impossible. But for more of my public shows, social media, the Museum of the Impossible Project, and more, you can head on over to oftheimpossible.com. I'm Peter Wood. Thanks.
I'm Willard. I remembered my line.
And who are you? I'm Joel.
I'm just a guy in the middle. Which is